Hi, welcome back to another video. This is my video on Australia and the holiday we had there a few years ago. Now, we never really wanted to go to Australia before. We'd always done all our holidays in either Europe or the USA, and we'd never been that bothered about Australia. But for a holiday for my wife, for her birthday, her criteria was that she wanted to go somewhere warm and somewhere where she could do some snorkeling. So with her birthday being in October, we had to sort of think, well, we've either got to go somewhere very close to the equator to be able to get somewhere warm, and we would then have to find somewhere where we could do some really good snorkeling. Now, we'd done snorkeling in the past around off Florida, off Key West, so we'd done that 2 or 3 times, and although we really enjoyed it, we wanted to try somewhere new. So when I was Googling best places to go snorkeling, always in the top 2 or 3 was the Great Barrier Reef, which is Australia. Now, apart from knowing that the Great Barrier Reef is in Australia, or just off the coast of Australia, and that there's a place that we wanted to we thought we might like to see, which would be Sydney Opera House and the Sydney Harbour Bridge. They were the only things we knew about Australia. We knew very, very little else because we'd never really been that bothered about going there. One of the things that we were aware of was the fact that it takes a very long time from the UK to get there, so we knew it was going to be a bit of a challenge to travel. So what we decided to do was, because of the length of time to get there, we thought we may as well have a long holiday there. So we decided on 3 weeks. We would have had longer, but we've got 2 school-aged children, and with us living in Wales, we're allowed to take them out of school for 2 weeks at a time, and we really wanted to go for my wife's birthday in October. So what we did was we planned the holiday around the half-term break at the end of October. So we went 2 weeks before the half-term break and the week of the half-term break, and then came back pretty much at the end of that half-term break, giving us enough time to get over the jet lag before we started back to school and back to work. So that was our plan. Now, with us not really knowing much about Australia, we were obviously using Google a lot. So we Googled where a lot of the places were that sold tours of the Great Barrier Reef. And as you can see here, these bits here, these shaded bits here, are the main bits of the Great Barrier Reef. Now, when we Googled a lot of them, we found that there was an awful lot of tours and different places that did tours in Cairns and Port Douglas. There were some very sort of, high concentration of places that did tours of the Great Barrier Reef. Then we thought, well, actually, we also want to see Sydney. Now, we didn't really know how far away Sydney was from Cairns, but if you look here now, that's obviously, you can see that on maps. So if we just do Cairns in Queensland, and then we do directions from Cairns to Sydney, and we have a look at those directions. We are asking for thingy directions there, for driving directions. We let it jog away for a little bit, and we see there it takes 27 hours just to drive there. That's without any stops. That's just straight there, which obviously is a huge amount of distance, 2,500 kilometres nearly, and that would be to cut inland as well. We really wanted to try and do the coast, so we did a destination there, and we moved it to Brisbane, just so we knew we were able to go down the coast. And then what we could do is, I think you can move that up there, so we're going to so again that adds another few hours onto it, so we're over 2,500 kilometres, 29 hours of driving. That's an awful long time. What we would usually do is we would fly into the same airport as we flew out of to save having to do one-way drop-off on car hire, but we very quickly realised that would just be too much to fly into Cairns and out of Sydney. We then looked to see what would happen if we flew into Brisbane, and flew in and out of Brisbane. Obviously then we'd have the drive up to Cairns, then back to Brisbane, then back to Sydney, then back to Brisbane. It just became a bit silly. So what we decided to do was, we noticed on Skyscanner there's a multi-city option. So what we decided to do, we'd do Manchester to Cairns and then come back from Sydney to Manchester. we thought we'd try that. Now, we tried a number of different scenarios, and this one seemed to be our best bet. We did Skyscanner, and it just so happened when we actually searched on it initially, when we clicked through on a price that we liked, it was actually directly with Sinapore Airlines in the end, and it was all with Singapore. We'd never flown with Sinapore Airlines before, but they are actually a very, very good airline, we found. So this is the way we sort of tackled it. Now, I can tell you when we actually did the flight, there was a stop off in Singapore on the way, so we flew from Manchester to Singapore. That took about 13 and a half hours. We were then on the ground in Singapore for an hour, and then the flight then from Singapore to Cairns took 6 hours. So we were travelling in total, I think it was 21 hours in total to get to Cairns. When we then flew back from Sydney, again it was just a one stop, so Sydney to Singapore was about 8 or 9 hours, I think, and then we were on the ground in Singapore for an hour and a half, and then Singapore back to Manchester was then another 14 hours. So they were the longest flights we've ever encountered. Even sort of when we've been going over to the States, the maximum we've sort of flown for is 10 hours, and then that's it. We've never had another one after it, if you know what I mean. So it was a bit of a challenge, especially with two young children in tow. Well, they weren't that young at the time, I suppose. My son was 10 and my daughter was 13, so it wasn't too bad. So we tackled it that way. We found the flight to Singapore with Sinapore Airlines was absolutely fantastic. But what we would say, especially if you're going with children, is if you are going on that route, check what the food options are on the plane before you go. We didn't bother doing that, and we found that with it flying into Singapore, the food options were quite spicy Asian food, which you would imagine, but I never even thought of that, which the children didn't really like at all. So we were then worried the fact that on a 14-hour flight, none of the food options suited them. But what we didn't realise was with Sinapore Airlines, you can at any point either call somebody or you can go to the back of the plane, and they have what they called snacks available, and those snacks were large bags of crisps, they were sandwiches, they were rolls, they were nuts, there was chocolate bars, there was drinks, there was all sorts. So, and this obviously there was a limited supply, but it seemed unlimited because every time we asked there was stuff available for us. So the children basically filled up on that. The other challenge we had, which was with it being a 13 and a half hour flight, I think it was, to Singapore, there were some problems, some headwinds. We left on time, and the aircraft was fantastic, as I say, really good seats, fantastic entertainment, but there were some headwinds, which meant with us only having a short 1 hour turnaround in Singapore, I think by the time we got down and the aircraft door opened, we had 20 minutes then to make the next flight, which was very, very tight. To be fair to Sinapore Airlines, they were fantastic with the way they handled it. They managed to switch our bags to the new plane without any issues whatsoever, and within probably an hour of us landing, they made available maps on the screens in front of us, which showed us how to quickly get from where we were going to be, the gate we were going to be at in Singapore, to the gate we were going to be getting for the flight to Cairns. So we had full directions. It was about a 5 to 10 minute walk once we got off the plane to the new one. Okay, it was a little bit tight, but it worked okay. What I would say was we switched from Sinapore Airlines' own plane to, I think it was called Silk Air, which was not as good a class of plane, to be fair, for the 6 hour flight to Cairns. It didn't have entertainment on the plane at all. So we were just sort of stuck. To be honest, at that point I was so tired, because at that point it was probably about 2 o'clock in the morning for me, and we'd been on the go for about 18 hours by the time we'd got up, got to the airport, got on the flight and so on. So I slept for most of that 6 hour journey anyway, so it didn't really bother me. But they did have Wi-Fi available in there, but it wasn't connected to the actual internet. So what we would have had to have done before we got on the plane, we would have to have downloaded the Silk Air app before we boarded the plane. Then we would have been able to watch movies on our phones from their internal Wi-Fi. But with us not knowing that, we didn't do it, which meant we were a bit stuck for entertainment on that particular flight. It didn't seem to take that long. It didn't, obviously for me, I was asleep for most of it, but there was food and stuff available on there. We then landed in Cairns and got off the plane. It was all on time again, no problems whatsoever. And we went through customs without any issues at all. We obviously made sure we weren't 100% sure on some of the questions for what we were bringing into the country, because we had things like paracetamol for the children in liquid form, which we didn't know was allowed, whether it was allowed or not. And we were bringing in tea bags, which again could be against their customs regulations for bringing in food. So we made sure we ticked on the customs claim forms that we had that stuff with us. When they asked us about it, we told them what it was, and they said they were happy for it to go through. So it's just a tip there that we basically, if you're not sure, always tick yes, and then you can ask them. If you find you've ticked yes and they find that the stuff you shouldn't bring in, then it's no problem. They'll just identify it and they'll destroy it, and you'll be on your way. If you tick no and they find it, then there'll be a $220 fine. So it's just make sure you're always just upfront with them. Don't worry about it, and then you'll be sorted. We got to the airport then, and we'd hired a car for the duration of the 3 weeks, and there was a one-way drop-off to Sydney. Fortunately, we managed to find a company with no one-way drop-off charges, which was excellent. We came out of the main airport. There was a car hire desk there, but it was not manned at that point in the day, because it was 4 o'clock, I think, on a Sunday when we got there. We used the phone that was there, and that put us in touch with the main terminal, because we'd come into the international terminal, not the internal terminal. They then just told us that there was actually a red line painted on the floor. They told us to follow the red line out. So it was a 5-minute walk from that then straight to the internal terminal. And within 15 minutes, we had the car keys and we were on our way to the car. We'd used offline maps to download a map of Cairns, and we were then able to drive to our hotel for the first night, which again was fantastic. It was the Ibis. We didn't really know much about Cairns. So we'll just sort of zoom in on here. There's Cairns Airport there. The main sort of downtown shopping area is here. And we were staying at the Ibis, which was somewhere down sort of here, within about a 5-minute walk of, I can actually put it in here, Ibis, the Ibis Styles Cairns. Yeah, so that was here. The drive from the airport was about 10 to 15 minutes. It was really straightforward to find, and we were then settled into the hotel. We had 4 nights there to begin with. Now, when we arrived, because I'd had sleep on the plane, I was still quite awake, and I'd say by the time we got to the hotel, it was about 5 o'clock in the evening, and my wife wanted a cup of tea, but we realised we didn't have any milk. There was the kitchen with a kettle in the hotel room, but there was obviously no milk. There was a fridge there, but there was nothing. So I went and asked where we would be able to get some milk, and the response really surprised me. With coming from the UK, the woman said, "Yeah, Woolworths down the street should be open. It's a 5-minute walk in that direction. Off you go." Now, from the UK, Woolworths ceased to exist in the UK a number of years ago, but it turns out that in Australia, Woolworths is massive. It's like Tesco's in the UK or Walmart in the USA. Everywhere there's a Woolworths, and they're open constantly, and they sell pretty much everything. I walked down the street 5 minutes away from the hotel, and I had access to that Woolworths there. You can see this Woolworths here on the map. Woolworths in Cairns, and it had, as well as milk and groceries, it had a deli, so I was able to get some hot food, some pies and some chicken nuggets and everything for the kids, for us to have a snack before going to bed. There was sun cream, there was clothes, there was pretty much everything you could think of, and they were absolutely fantastic. So I can definitely recommend Cairns as a fantastic sort of start to the holiday. I'm going to probably sign off now, and what I'll do in the future is I'll make some more videos of where we visited while we were there, and show you some photos of what actually happened while we were on our holiday, if anyone's interested. Thanks very much for listening.